Hi guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads. It's been a while. I'm jumping right from my July wrap up to my August wrap up. I've been away on vacation for 2 weeks and I have, I think, probably 2 travel videos coming up after this one, which I'm really excited about, and I hope you guys will like them as well. I know this channel is technically a book channel and I don't really talk about anything else, but I just like the idea of having a place to store those memories in, even if it's just me who watches them. So in August, I read a total of 6 books, which I think is a good number, seeing as it was quite the busy month. I would say there's a theme here. You'll see that I definitely gravitated towards light and fast reads. The first book that I finished as an ebook is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This was on my summer TBR challenge. I think it was after I had added this book on my TBR and was going through some of the reviews more in depth. I noticed that there were quite a few negative comments that were criticizing stands and the point of views of this book, which I now understand. So this book takes place, I think, in the 70s and 80s in around Charleston, so in South Carolina, which I have visited before actually. And it's about a group of women who come together in a book club. Most of them are stay-at-home moms, and then a vampire moves into town. I will start with the positives that I had for this book. First of all, I think that the general premise just sounded very fun, you know, like having a bunch of book club members suddenly have to slay a vampire. In terms of gore and horror, it wasn't too much. It was kind of where I would have wanted it to be without feeling too uncomfortable or too freaked out. Keeping in mind though what I have to say on this topic afterwards. It was definitely a fast read, even though the pace of it was kind of off, pretty slow actually at times. So it wasn't all bad, but if you just, you know, remove the first layer of it, there's quite a few issues with this book, which is kind of a bummer. I think my 2 main criticisms for this book is the negative Black representation and also the sexist plot lines in here and characterizations. Yes, I get that it's set in the Deep South in the 80s, but at the same time there's a vampire here, so you don't have to be that realistic and sensitive to, okay, how was it back then? Do you know what I'm saying? You could have easily just avoided that, or anybody who was editing this book, in my opinion, could have, you know, raised their voice, but I really don't know what happened there. As I mentioned before, the representation of the Black characters in this book is quite negative. Even the vampire, at least in the beginning, exclusively attacks people from like a Black poor neighborhood. Then there's a very important part of the plot that has to do with mental health that is used as a not so great plot device, and I think that topic was handled very uncarefully as well. And a big part of the horror in the book comes from the abuse and violation that is thrown at females or their bodies. Unnecessary descriptions, in my opinion, about how maybe someone's body is not that great, and that is kind of used as a device to make the reader feel uncomfortable, which I think you could have used something else. And in general, the progression of the plot was a bit inconsistent and slowed down at some points for, to me, unknown reasons. So all in all, I kind of had really high hopes for this book. I thought it's going to be like a really fun horror, but ultimately it just had too many flaws, in my opinion. I don't know if the other books by this author have the same issues. Then I finished a nonfiction book, which I listened to. It's Cultish by Amanda Montell. It's The Language of Fanaticism. This was an interesting one. Maybe not that memorable for me, so I give it 3 out of 5 stars, but nevertheless, it was an interesting ride. I learned quite a few new things. I'm not that familiar with cults. I know that a lot of people are very into this topic. So as the title suggests, this gives you an insight into cults, the language that they use, and the culture that is connected with it. And with that, it's exploring the idea of what is a cult, like what is the difference between, let's say, a religion and cult, and why is maybe Peloton a cult? It's definitely calling out a bunch of cults that did exist where horrible things happened, as well as I mentioned, like fitness clubs and how the language that they use to basically isolate members is cultish, and also a bunch of MLMs. So that was a very interesting part of the audiobook. And one point that stood out to me in this book was the perspective on brainwashing and preying on vulnerable people, because at least for me, I always just assumed that that's kind of how cults pick their members, that they prey on people who seem vulnerable, who maybe seem a bit detached from their social environment, and then brainwash them. But this book offered an anti-hypothesis to that, basically. So in general, while this book isn't going to make it in my top 5 nonfictions, most likely, I still think it is worthwhile the listen or the read. Then I read Love Your Life by Sophie Kinsella. I had picked this up in my last book outlet haul, especially keeping in mind that I wanted to read something that's like holiday themed to get into the mood. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It is a very, cheesy, fast read, but if you manage to lean into that, then I think this is perfectly enjoyable, as many of Sophie Kinsella's reads. I checked on my Goodreads. This is the highest rating I have given to a Sophie Kinsella book that is not part of the Shopaholic series, so I think this is a win. This book is about Ava, who wants to be a writer. So she goes to Italy and goes in like a week-long writing retreat, where by chance she meets a certain someone. Well, he calls himself Dutch because they don't call themselves by their real names there. They hit it off, and a very hot and fast romance between these two start, which then gets to be put to the test once they're back in London. This was a very enjoyable, positive surprise. You fly through this kind of book. I think that the author did a really good job on capturing the heat during the first chapters when they first meet. It really feels like a fresh summer romance. And then as you read on, obviously you kind of notice, okay, fine, like these characters, they're the main characters, and also their friends and everybody around them, they're more like cliches. They're not too well carved out. They're not very complex people. It's very two-dimensional, but I mean, that is kind of what I expected anyway, so that's why that didn't really stop my enjoyment. It's not a perfect read, that's why I didn't give it 5 stars, but all in all, I think it's written with a lot of heart, and that really shines through. So if you want to read about a couple that starts out super strong and then goes into, the day-to-day life, and that's where the struggle lies, and they have to see, okay, are we really compatible? Then this is for you. Then I listened to The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, and I listened to this one intentionally because I'm familiar with his YouTube videos, and I just like his narrative voice. And I think at this point, you probably already have an opinion on John Green. You either dislike him or you really like his work, and I am on the side of I love his writing. I don't know what it is, I don't know how to describe it, but for every book, fast-paced, very like whimsical writing, and he goes on a lot of tangents, manages to bring it back together to a very solid point. It is very personable writing, in my opinion. What I didn't realize is that this book is actually a collection of reviews in essay form that review the human experience, essentially. And the reviews and essays are on random things. I absolutely enjoyed that. I have learned quite a bit of new information about a lot of variety of different topics, ranging from a certain type of grass that people use on their lawns in America to Dr. Pepper. And because it is a bunch of reviews, there's obviously quite a bit of criticism in there, but he always manages to relate it back to common experience that most of us will have, and he leaves us with actually a lot of hope for the future, for humanity, for the planet. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I kind of hope that he will bring out more books like this that are maybe nonfiction instead of just fiction. I also finished Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elko Simano. Also picked this up on my last book outlet haul. This was super fun. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. You should not pick this up if you're looking into reading a real hard-hitting thriller or psychological thriller or a really sophisticated crime story. This is really more a fun comedy amateur hitman story or hitwoman story. So our main character is Finley, who wants to be a writer, which I'm now realizing that this is the second book in that month that I read about a woman trying to become a writer. And in this case, Finley is a divorced woman who also raises co-parents, two very young kids, and she's in big financial troubles. One day she meets with her, I think it's her literary agent, in a cafe where she describes a murderous plot to her, and somebody overhears and thinks that she's a hitwoman, promptly makes her an offer to kill that person's husband for a lot of money. Finley, from there on out, starts making a bunch of very bad decisions. So yes, you will get very annoyed with her, but if you manage to lean into that and just, you know, try to accept all of these bad decisions and, you know, get over the cringy part, then this is a great fun ride. This does not play out into a huge elaborate thriller plot. It's a bit slower than that. It's more character-based. One thing that kind of confused me was the nanny's involvement into the story. If you read it, you know what I mean. I just really couldn't get 100% on board with that. Other than that, I enjoyed this book and I'm most likely going to pick up the second one. And lastly, I finally read The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. And I actually read this for the same reason that I read Finley Donovan is Killing It, is because I had these books already on my shelves, and then my sister actually read both of them, and that motivated me to also pick them up after her. So this is a straight up romance, which I am not used to, because during the first pages, I definitely had some moments where I just couldn't help but cringe, and I wasn't sure if I'm gonna make it through the book. So we have two main characters, right? We have Kristen and we have Josh. So Kristen and Josh, they're respectively maid of honor and best man for their friends' upcoming wedding. So they have mutual friends, kind of have a rough start in getting to know each other, but you know, then there's like circumstances that lead them to have to work together for the wedding, for example, and that's where they get to know each other, and obviously there's a little something sparking between them. So right from the beginning, Kristen's behind gets objectified, but then Josh is getting objectified too. So you tell me if you're an avid romance reader, is objectifying the main characters and sexualizing them in such a way a normal thing? Maybe it's part of the genre, I don't know. So I did not have a good start with this book. I was really unsure if I should keep on reading, but I did notice quite quickly that there were some very serious parts to the story actually, which I didn't expect at all. And once you let go and, you know, and you give in to the insta love and the cringiness, it is quite a fast read and enjoyable. That's why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So I was positively surprised by the topics that this book picked up and how it handled them. Although I have some criticism. One thing in here that really bugged me. So our main character, Kristen, has a lot of issues with her period, with her menstruation cycle. And her boyfriend is being portrayed as a man's man, where he doesn't really like going out and buying her pads or anything. But then we have Josh, so the other main character, who is completely okay with that. He, you know, has not any problems understanding that she has to go through her cycle, that she might be moody, that she might need, you know, like hygiene products. But the reason why he is like that is because I think he has, I kid you not, 6 or 5 sisters. So the author heavily implies that the only reason Josh is okay with Kristen having a cycle and has no problems accepting that she needs hygiene products, for example, is because he has not just 1, 2, or 3, but he has like something between 4 or 6 sisters. And that is the reason why he's such a great guy and buys her hygiene products and gets her food from McDonald's when she's, you know, hungry and moody. That really bugged me because, in my opinion, you don't need 5 sisters to understand that, you know, there's menstruating people on this planet, and, you know, it's just a fact of life. The ending of the book was fine. First I was not happy with it, and then there was an author's note actually on the ending, which helped. But I think without the author's note, I thought that the ending would have been not a great point to the whole premise of the book, or to everything that was developing in the book. I think it would have been a step back. Not a favorite, but also positively surprised about the topics that it picked up. And that's it for the books that I read in August. Let me know if you have picked up any of these before and what you think of them. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much. Bye.